Hello and welcome to Asia Tech Podcast. My name is Graham Brown, joined in the studio by Isabel Gonzalez. Gonzalez,
yeah.
Proper pronunciation.
Exactly.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Graham. Thanks for having me here today.
It's lovely to have you here because you've got a really interesting accent, which I'm trying to unpack. There's a bit going on, a bit Spanish, a bit Australian, a bit English.
A bit Kiwi as well.
Bit Kiwi. There's a lot there, isn't there? There's a lot to unpack. There's a big story there, isn't it? How many countries have you lived in?
I've lived in Germany, in England, in Spain, in Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore.
Wow.
For 7 years now in Singapore.
Now in Singapore.
Yeah.
I love those different flip-flop on the accents. But you were born in Spain?
No, I was actually born in Germany.
Oh, you were born in Germany?
I was made in Spain, but born in Germany.
Okay. Maybe too much detail there. So how many languages do you speak?
I speak Spanish, English, French, Italian, and German.
Wow.
Yeah, no,
I feel ashamed.
a little bit of Singlish sometimes.
Singlish, all right. Yeah, it's more of a dialect, isn't it? So you've had this really fascinating cultural background, and I'm wondering, we're going to talk about Klaud9. So you're the founder, co-founder of founder of Klaud9, which is essentially, a visual, a photography-based website. We're going to talk about it, what it is, and we're going to dive into your pitch deck and have a look at that in a minute. To what extent has that sort of come from your background of living in many different cultures and travel and so on? Was it something that, were you a photographer at heart? Were you somebody who was fascinated by pictures and visual form and culture and so on?
Yeah, I mean, my background is marketing.
Right.
So I've been in corporate life for over 15 years and always in marketing. So I was director of marketing of different companies. And obviously you develop an eye for, for photography and videos and what is required and how best to engage with your clients. So that is a little bit, how I got into, Klaud9, because I was a country manager here for an online travel agency for cheap tickets SG, but at the same time leading the marketing department. And we set it up about 7 years ago, so in 2010. And then we started realizing that there was a lack of Asian stock photos and videos as well.
Right. What would you mean by that?
Well,
I mean, with Asian people in it?
Yeah, exactly. So normally in Europe and the US, we would be used to being able to buy online stock photos with the look and feel of the people you want to engage to, so your clients.
Yeah. And
here what we found is that there was a lack and that they were very staged, but also very old-fashioned. And the reason here for is because, obviously the US and Europe stock photography has been existing for the last 20 years. So photographers, they know how to go out, they look for the talents, they look for the, locations. So they shoot, they go online and they upload the photos. And here in the past, in Asia, it's always just been commission shoots. Right. So that is a little bit the problem we're trying to solve here, because now global brands, and that's from Google to Visa to in any brand, any global brand based here in Asia, they want to localize now their marketing campaigns and they want to engage, with the customers, obviously by using people that, look like them. So if it's Indonesians, if it's, Thai, and so on. So that's a little bit, the problem we're trying to solve, because there is a lack of it. Right.
And well, we'll talk about that, because this is something that I've faced as a founder, an entrepreneur as well, when I've been building businesses in Asia. If I wanted to show pictures of, like you mentioned, Indonesians, you look for this in a traditional stock website. So there'd be like deposit photos or, Shutterstock and you'd have like the Getty and the Orbis and so on. And if you look for anything like that, it would say, for example, Asian, but then it would be Chinese. If you're lucky, you might get Chinese consumers, which if you're Indonesian, they're not Indonesian, right? Because they not only look different, but they dress differently and their mannerisms and so on. So they're going to have that sort of specific feel. So there's a real lack there. And, a lot of the stuff, like you say as well, that market in the US, for example, there are people whose job it is just to take stock photos. I know photographers who do that. So there's that secondary market of people who go and gather the keywords that people are looking for, right? Whereas here in Asia, that doesn't quite exist yet, does it? I mean, there are professional photographers, and you say commission-based.
Exactly, yeah. So what's been happening is obviously the leaders in stock photography and on-demand branded content as well are American companies or European English companies, actually. And but because they were not sensitive to the differences in Asian ethnicities either. So you would normally find when you go onto Shutterstock or onto Getty and so on that they would just tag them with Asian and then multi-tag them with Malay, sort of Chinese, Indonesian, Thai, and so on. So, and there is a difference, obviously, and that's where we specialize in. So we only focus on Asian ethnicities. So we do not allow our photographers to multi-tag the ethnicity. But if it's a Vietnamese, it's a Vietnamese. And if it's a Thai, it's a Thai. So, and the reason... Therefore, it's because we're saying that, obviously each ethnicity within Asia looks completely different. And if you're looking for something particular, then that's, what you should be finding.
Interesting.
But our challenge in our case is, like you said, the sort of photographers in the West, they're used to producing stock photos because they think long term. And for them, that means I upload 200 photos today. And over a period of 6 months or a year, it's going to give me a monthly income. And that's a mindset that doesn't exist here in Asia yet.
Exactly.
So that's the challenge that we face in getting photographers on board, where we say, I know commission shoot is going to give you, sort of money now, but stock photos is going to give you money, sort of in the long term. And that's a little bit of sort of the educational part that, sort of we're trying to set up here in the region as well.
Right. Okay, good. Well, let's have a look at your pitch deck and look at how you're solving that problem. We'll have a quick click through. We can get the pitch deck up, so maybe we can start. Oh, we've got the team up here. We'll come to those in a minute. If I can just click it right to the top. Obviously, this is Klaud9. The problem that you're solving, we've talked a little bit about here. I want to talk about the size of the market because you've put some interesting data up here. Obviously, these are the big guys. Shutterstock, Getty Images are the biggest in the world. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so they're just short of $1 billion in revenues in Getty Images. And market size. So what are we looking at here? You've carved out the APAC advertising market. Obviously, this is the market that you understand very well, having worked in it. 156 billion a year. How big is the Asian stock market stock photo market?
Yeah, I would say the challenge within our sector is that there's no real data. Like for example, in travel, in online travel, or whether it's OTAs or so, you have a lot of data. We know that the revenue approximately coming from those stock, sort of websites like Shutterstock and Getty tends to be about 30% from the APAC region. So that's a little bit, sort of across the market, and that's at the moment just for two of them. There are obviously many more. There's Adobe there's Deposit Photos, and there's so many other, websites. Overall, we know that the stock photo market accounts for over $6 billion in revenue. So we know that for the big boys, Asia is one of the fastest growing market at the moment, while Europe and the US, where stock photography has been around for 20 years, is a bit stagnant at the moment because there are so many players as well. So there are a lot of specialized smaller players, while here in Asia there is no specialized Asian player. So even Shutterstock and Getty, so they've been talking to us the same as Adobe and other, sort of websites, and they're all looking for Asian content. Yeah. So they even come to us saying, can we give them our Asian content? So we're all struggling in, sort of producing or getting that content. The good news is that obviously, global brands, they have recognized that they need to localize. They cannot use Westerners anymore. They cannot use, sort of Chinese, sort of in Indonesian market and so on. So there is a lack there, and there's a big opportunity because, sort of nowadays Asia is developing in a very different way. And the good thing that is on our side as well is that with digital marketing, sort of things have changed a lot as well. I come from like 15 years ago where there was no, digital marketing, no mobiles, no, sort of display ads and so on. And that has changed the whole landscape as well. So which means with digital and social media, you need to be able to download photos straight away. at a low cost. And you don't have a lot of budget, for example, to spend on branded content either, because that's the other thing that we do. We have also on-demand branded content, but it has to be low cost because, for social media, display ads, website, you want fast, sort of photos and, and videos. And so the turnaround time has to be quick and it has to be low cost. And that's really on our side because here in Asia, it's really the region where we most use the mobile. I've never used, so much my mobile like when I'm here versus, sort of in Europe, which means, the digital advertising is going to grow from 135 billion to nearly 240 billion over the next few years, which is great because that means, there's more need for photos and videos in the future as well.
Add to that, I don't know if it's in your presentation, but something we talk about a lot here at Asia Tech Podcast is the middle class and the growth of the middle class in Asia.
Exactly.
The numbers there, 2009, I think 700 million middle class in Asia, growing to 3.5 billion by 2030. Now, every single one of those middle class families is going to want advertising targeted at them by the agencies, and they're all going to want something very specific, whether they're Vietnamese middle class or Chinese middle class, they're all going to need something very specific. So my question to you, Isabel, is how do you get the content? Because they don't have that sort of layer as developed as you have in the US, where you have the professional stock photographers going out and looking for keywords. How do you get it? What do you do? How do you get, for example, we need to get photos of Vietnamese middle-class families, and they're in a kitchen, or, Vietnamese mom with daughter. Those are the kind of searches that people are looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah, because just to preface it as well, just to show how difficult this is, I've actually looked for photos of, away from the image, the people themselves, of skylines. And if you go, I know you can grab this and get this like free content anyway, but if you were like running an ad campaign, you would want to pay for this stuff, right? I would go onto a stock photo website like Deposit Photos, look for a skyline of Shanghai, and the skyline of Shanghai was taken 5 years ago, and it's completely different. There's like buildings missing, so because it was taken by somebody who maybe went traveling back in Asia, went back to the US and so on. There isn't that up-to-date content. How do you get it?
So we have a product called Online Breeze, which is a crowdsourcing of photos. So what we do is, with that on our platform, we'll reach out to photographers across the region. And a lot of it works through networking as well. So one photographer tells another photographer and so on, that we're crowdsourcing the photos. So one perfect example was Google at the beginning of this year. They were looking for, sort of a specific campaign for them to launch a product. And they asked us, sort of to source stock photos of, sort of Asians in, doing a certain action. It could be, sort of shopping, sort of at the local market and so on. So we had to go out and we reached out personally to all these photographers that we have in our network. And it's a crowdsourcing of photos that you do, because a lot of photographers, they shoot for fun, right, but they don't put it up onto websites. So we found actually that 90% of the photos we actually gave Google in the end had never been posted on any other platform, and they were just sitting on a laptop. Sort of the photographer, and then they ended up earning, lots of money for a photo that they had just shot, sort of for fun. So that's how, sort of we build the network among, sort of all the photographers, and it's really building a brand, and a brand takes time, especially, sort of in a region where photographers are not used to uploading, sort of to photos, to platforms, online platforms. So it's really, sort of the crowdsourcing of photos. So that's how we reach out. So we even do it, manually going through Instagram, talking to, sort of going through the portfolios of photographers, right, networking and so on. And then we going even into universities. So we do educationals as well, and try to get on board, young photographers, with the eye for photography, for them to understand that everything is going online nowadays, that not to think of, sort of photography anymore as a normal commercial shoot, but to think, in the long term, and the more you produce, sort of the more, steady income, you will get over the next few months. So that's a little bit, how we work with them. And then with partnerships. So partnerships could be the types of, online travel agencies like Expedia. We did a big campaign, for example, as well. where we launched a campaign a year ago to produce photos, in the different destinations, and that helped us, sort of to upload them, to our database and so on. So we work sort of in different ways. We sort of try to be creative within that as well. And then we produce ourselves as well, content. So we have our own photographers as well who produce content for us, and then other photographers who work with us as well.
Right. Interesting. I imagine that the photographers that you work with tend to skew a bit younger because they have a different mindset.
Exactly, yeah.
I know professional photographers and journalist photographers as well. Yeah. And their mindset is, it's like, I get paid a lot of money to take a photo or, of these people, for example. Yeah. They have a real problem with this idea of, sort of putting it out there almost, for a low cost. But the fact is they put a lot of content out there, they can make a lot of money. Mindset wise, they're not sort of geared up to it. How are you finding that? Yeah,
we find that more, the younger generation now, because they're used to uploading onto Instagram anyway, right, and to Facebook and so on. So they think more online. And we find that sort of they're more, sort of younger photographers who are more open to it, and they want to travel. And that's their main objective, to travel, shoot photos, and make money out of it. So it's a good way for them, sort of to make money at the end of the day.
So do you reach out to them on Instagram and say, hey, look, I love your photos. Have you ever thought about monetizing them like this?
Exactly, yes. We
Must
do
be
that as
an easy proposition for them, right?
It's, well, it just depends because, sort of sometimes, people are not used to selling their own photos with them inside of the photo. Yeah. And then you need the model released ideally as well. For commercial campaigns, you need photographers to, sort of sign the model releases with the models. So that's something that, sort of they're only learning, sort of a little bit on the job. Yeah. But we find that like the network of photographers we've been working with in the past has been more younger generation, who embrace technology, I would say, in a different way that, sort of the photographers have been around for 15 or 20 years. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, good. Can we talk a little bit about your team as well? Because you've got a slide on your pitch deck. Maybe we can jump to that you've actually talked a little about who's in your team. This is quite like an interesting mix. I'm just going to scroll through. So this is your team here. And so you're based in Singapore and Jakarta. Yeah. Okay, so who's based where? How many do you have in Singapore? How many in Jakarta?
I mean, we're still a small team because we only launched in April last year. So we've been around now for 1 year. So we have Ronnie, she's our art director, and she does the UI and UX. Then Jean-Charles, he's in charge of the development of the website. Serene, she does the production. She helps with the production of the, campaigns and of, sort of the shoots. And then we have an in-house photographer, Hafiz, who supervises, any of the shoots and helps us, with that as well. And Lavi and Alia, they sit in Jakarta and they help us with, sort of reaching out to photographers in Indonesia because there's a very big market there.
Yes. It's a massive market. There's a lot of photographers in Indonesia.
There's a lot of photographers, and they're very good photographers as well. So very creative, and we're trying to.
Why is that? What is it about Indonesia and photography? Because I know in Instagram earlier on, a lot of the meetups. Yeah. Like Jakarta was a huge base for people just meeting up and taking photos. They were very early adopters of photography on Instagram. Yeah. I'd say it's a little bit, to do with creativity. They like to be more creative. They like to think out, sort of a bit more out of the box. And then Indonesia is a fantastic place to take photos as well. I mean, landscapes, beaches, wherever you go. And I think it's a great opportunity for them just to pick up, sort of the camera and just take photos. It's a beautiful place. But we're very lucky that there are so many photographers out there. And the good thing is that outside of Singapore, which is really the hub for global brands, Indonesia is most of the time, so the majority of those brands, the first, most important market because it is a big market. Right. So you find any global brand, has a big presence in Indonesia. Exactly. So that's why for us it's important to have a presence there and not only for, sort of to reach out to photographers, but also, sort of to engage, sort of with the brands over there and to get them in as clients. I suppose that the needs are quite specific as well in a place like Indonesia. There's many different looks and many different backgrounds, even like cultures within Indonesia. Island by island, they're going to look, dress, speak differently, and like that vibe's going to be different, isn't it? So you couldn't just put maybe #Indonesian. You made it like Bali or Lombok, maybe it's different. I don't know if somebody was very specific with their marketing.
Yeah, I mean, what we find is where there's a real lack is at the moment, sort of photos with people. So we just did recently a project with Nivea in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and it was a very good project because sort of they wanted just a sort of Indonesian, but a sort of the more Pan-Asian look a little bit as well.
Right.
For just candid, sort of lifestyle photography, with the product and without the product. So where the lack is really is, so there's a lack of, stock photos with people. So we find there's, more, I'd say there's more offer on landscapes and
Bali,
nature and so on.
Yeah.
But when it comes to lifestyle photography with people, that's where, sort of we get in and then we help them, sort of to produce that content for them as well.
Is that just because, like you say, that it's not a professionalized market?
Exactly,
or is it a cultural thing maybe?
No, it's not professionalized. Right. So in the past, there was no need.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been here for 7 years now as well in the region. I would have said, so even 7 years ago, I would have not set up this type of business because probably the market was not ready yet. It's a very immature market. But nowadays, in 2018 and going forward, this has changed a lot. So
what's changed?
Well, that, sort of brands want to localize. So in Jakarta, when I speak to Nivea Jakarta, they say, we only want Indonesians in the photos.
Right. Well, that's a relief.
We don't want, sort of Chinese, sort of in the photos, but this is the look and feel that we want. So that's what's, been changing a lot, sort of. And then when I speak to brands here, they want the diversity in the picture. Yeah. So the diversity in Singapore can be Singaporean Chinese, Singaporean Malay, Singaporean Indian, and they want that diversity in the photos when it comes to, I don't know, a group of friends going out, having lunch or having dinner or, sort of doing, or a startup environment, and they want that diversity, which doesn't exist normally in the stock photos.
Yeah, I tell you that it happens to be one stock photo that doesn't exist anyways, Asian startup.
Yeah.
I've searched for it everywhere because anything you get is obviously in an American office.
Yeah, you find that a lot. Because what happens is that a lot of American photographers, I mean, outside of Asia, the US would be the biggest market with Asians. So there are a lot of, sort of American photographers who just shoot any ethnicity. Yeah. So it can be from, sort of a Western, American over to, sort of Chinese American, because, it's a second generation. It can be, sort of Black American. So they just shoot anything across. And that's why you find that the majority of the photos are in an American setup. Yeah. So you can tell that it's, sort of, it's not Asia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about where you are as well as a business, because like you said, you started, when did you start?
Well,
last year? What?
We started the company in October 2016, but we didn't launch until April 2017.
Right, so you've been going for under 1 year.
April 17 to June now. No, just above a year.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, okay, so just above a year.
Yeah.
But you're already making money.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does most of the money come from? Like you've mentioned people like Nivea, for example. Is it sort of more of the bespoke work that you are finding the initial revenues coming from?
Yeah, so the biggest at the moment revenue is coming from on-demand branded content. Right. So that means low-cost shoots that we do on our platform. And that helps us because we get quicker revenue through that, and that helps us, to build at the same time, the stock, sort of photos that is going to give us more revenue in the long run. Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
But because it doesn't exist, those stock photos don't exist, they need to be either, sort of curated, sourced, or produced. And that's, sort of why on demand gives us, sort of quicker revenue at the moment, because there's a lack. Right. Also for, low cost, commercial shoots.
Yeah. Those models complement each other as well. You've got the on demand, as you say, it fuels the more sort of the platform style model as well. Mm-hmm. And long term they could work together. There's no reason why you can't have those running beside each other, because you will have people who don't want to necessarily go through and search through a whole platform, have a very specific need as well. Maybe they have a budget for that.
I mean, normally when we speak to brands, the reason why we started on demand as well is because each time we would go to visit any of the brands, they would always say to us, yes, we buy stock, but we also produce, we also need on-demand branded content, because normally they want exclusive photos or videos as well. and some of them with the products as well. So we then thought maybe it's a good opportunity for us to create a platform where, we can help brands, to have, both anything visual from photos over to videos, and it can be stock or it can be, sort of on demand or crowdsourced, sort of by us as well.
Okay. And you raising funds at the moment?
Yes, we're doing a seed fund at the moment. We're raising seed.
Yeah. What are you looking for? What's public at the moment? Are you allowed to share your public? I mean, you can share what you can. If you don't have details that you can share, maybe you can share what kind of people you're interested in talking to.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment we've raised a lot on convertible note from business angels. Mainly, and we're now looking for, a major round. So a major round would be a minimum of $500,000 to get Singapore dollars at the moment, to go to the next level, and that means a little bit of expansion. So putting, salespeople and operational people in, sort of in place in Jakarta, in KL, and in Thailand, and that sort of will help us to get to the next level sort of the expansion as well, because we've been running we've been stretching the money we raised sort of along sort of for quite a while, and with a very lean team, and we think now is the next level sort of that we need to get in. So ideally we would get either as a bridge sort of convertible note or private business angels on board. But we're looking really, sort of for a seed round at the moment.
Okay, so it's about $500,000 up.
$500,000.
About 350 US.
Yeah, exactly.
Roughly.
Yeah.
And that would be to, like you say, to expand your operations in those cities. You talked about Jakarta, KL, and Thailand. Singapore, obviously, not a cheap place to bootstrap a startup. But you're here. You're maintaining your presence here because you've got access to the buyers, the clients.
Global, exactly, yeah. Because a lot of the global, sort of head office are based here for the region. So it's easy for us, sort of to meet up with them. We sit right in the middle of Singapore and Amoy Street. And around there are a lot of advertising agencies, a lot of brands. So
this is the hub, right? And it's a great place to, I guess you're incorporated here as well. So it makes complete sense for the investors. All right, good. Excellent. I want to ask you more on the entrepreneurial side of things. You left a corporate environment.
Yes.
At what point did you think you became an entrepreneur? I'm just curious because I always wondered, like everybody that comes here, I wondered, at what point in your life do you consider yourself an entrepreneur? Is it something that you were born with? Did you learn it like when you were in your teens? Did you learn it when you went into the corporate environment? For yourself, at what point did you think you would like to become an entrepreneur? Or did it ever actually have that thought? Did it just sort of happen for you? Like, okay, now I'm an entrepreneur. What was the story there?
I think my story has always been, because for the previous companies I used to work with, part of my job or of my role, besides, looking after the marketing team and communications, has always been to look for business opportunities for additional revenue streams for the companies.
Yeah.
So I would always see an opportunity that I would say, okay, I think this could work. And because I've traveled my whole life, and a lot of, sort of business ideas come from the US, and I used to spend quite a bit of time there, or even in England, or, anywhere else in Europe. And I used to go back, to Spain prior to coming, to Singapore. I would always say, oh, I see, this could work here, or this could work here. And in fact, like 6 months later or a year later, those things, would happen. And the same thing here. When I came to Singapore, I thought this business model, that I've seen in Europe and the US, could work here. So and I've been developing, sort of concepts and ideas and new revenue streams for the previous companies I used to work with, but obviously not with my own money. And so that you have the financial security. So it's very different. And I have to say, I decided then, 2 years ago to quit corporate because I thought I'll just give it a try. I was working for...
Why did you decide people don't just give it a try?
It's really funny because I went to a conference, an e-commerce conference, and then there's this young, guy standing on the stage, and he was talking about, everything that he'd done and whatever. And I think he was 28 or 29.
Right.
And I thought, sort of I've spent, so many years going through corporate and learning so much, sort of, and learning about operations. So not only marketing, but I've been, sort of in very senior roles and also on boards and so on. And I thought maybe, sort of my experience helps me, sort of with the startup. And I think I walked out of the conference thinking, I can do this. But until you get the right idea, I'd always thought, I don't have the time to, work on a business plan and so on. But then the more I thought about, the stock, sort of photos and the on-demand branded content, I suddenly sort of found myself working in the evenings and on the weekends on a business plan. And then the last company I was working with, an online travel agency, they had new investors coming on board, and we didn't get on, so strategy-wise, what their objectives were for Singapore and for the region versus, sort of what I thought would, sort of be the best. And then I thought, well, I can either continue in corporate or I can give this a try. And that's really, sort of what happened, that I thought then, I've never raised funds in my whole life before. And I thought, if I'm able to raise some money, then I'm just going to give this a try and just jump into the cold water. And I had already worked on the business plan. And that's what I did. And and here I find myself.
Still smiling. But what was it like? I'm really curious, is that day one, now that you've left the corporate world and now you are the owner of your own business and you're starting out on the plan, what did it feel like that first day or that first initial period? What kind of thought processes were going in your head? The reason I ask is preparing people for that. Yeah. Was it really exciting? Were you like dancing around, like, hoo-hoo, I'm running my own business? Or what was the reality of that?
Yeah. I mean, reality is, yes, there's a lot of excitement about it because it's your own business, sort of. On the other hand, you get very scared as well because you don't have any financial support. That means you're not within a corporate company, and you sleep at nighttime normally, sort of, because you don't worry about, am I going to be able to pay people's salaries next month or not, if this works out or not, because a business plan at the end of the day is an idea, is a vision, and it's put on paper. Reality sometimes, can be very different, and that's why a lot of startups sometimes have to pivot. So I'd say my advice is you have to be really flexible enough and sort of recognize when, so you need to pivot into, I don't know, sometimes from B2C to B2B or vice versa, or maybe the product is not right, or maybe, still the market's still immature and it'll take some time, or you really have to be open, I think, and flexible. And the other thing is, it's not a sprint. So I find myself that if you give 150% right from the beginning, you have to pace yourself. It's like it's a long run. It's
a marathon.
It's a marathon, and it's a very long marathon. So, and only the ones that survive really that marathon, that just keep their head down and just keep on going, are the ones that really survive. Yeah. Because, at the beginning, and I know when we first started, we had some people, that dropped off, and that happens with any startup. And I think at the end of the day, it's really people who believe in the project and who believe that, if you keep on going, that it's a good idea, and that, sort of, that you think that it's gonna, it's gonna work out eventually. But it's a marathon, and it's and it's sometimes at times very challenging, very scary. And but it just
that's why we're here. I think it's the challenge that makes us grow.
Exactly.
The people that you're looking for to join your team as well, because you're talking about expanding in different countries as well. How do you know they believe, or is that important? I suppose I should ask the question. Is it important that they believe to the same extent that you believe? Because they're not the owner of the company. Do they need to come in with the same kind of belief in what you're doing, or is it okay just for job seekers? What are you looking for?
I think I'm convinced that they have to believe. And the reason why is also because, startups, we cannot, sort of pay the same salary as any other corporate company. So we really need people who are excited about, startup, who are excited about learning, sort of not only in a very, sort of specialized department, sort of only about branding, only about marketing, only about this, but who want to multitask, who want to learn across. It can be from operationals over to finance, over to marketing, sort of across, and then who believe in the project, because, sort of, if you don't believe anymore, if you think the business model is not going to work, they lose interest. And at the end of the day, sort of, if you pay, sort of low salaries to someone that has no interest whatsoever, it's just not going to work out. You know, you really need people who really believe, you know, sort of in the whole idea and the whole project.
And where do you see that? So if somebody came to you and said, I'd love to work for a startup. I heard, you know, a friend told me a startup was a good thing to work for. I want to give it a try. How do you know that they are the right person when you're recruiting rather than somebody who just kind of thinks it might be cool to work for a startup?
Sometimes at the beginning, you don't know.
Right.
I think it's a matter of trying out, because you do see that at the beginning they might be very excited and they might be very positive. But as I said, it's not easy in a startup. So it's a lot of long hours as well, and sometimes up and downs because you don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So it really has to be someone who is there for the long run as well. So who is willing to win, to run the marathon at the same time, you know, sort of as yourself as well. And as I said, we had sometimes, and it happens across all startups, at the beginning people are very excited, and then they sort of stop the marathon because they think this is too much, you know, they just give up. Yeah. So it's a bit hard to identify right from the beginning, I would say. It's just a matter of trying it out and see, you know, how they progress as well.
It's the only way to do it.
It's the only way to do it, yeah.
Isabel Gonzalez, everybody, founder, CEO of Klaud9. It's been a real pleasure having you on, and inspiring as well. You're smiling away. Yeah. Like the challenges. That's what it's all about. But I think, you know, it's great that, you know, that projects, and that's, you know, I believe often the founders are the DNA of the company. They're the one that sets the culture. You can get an idea for what it's like to work in that company by just seeing the founder and what they're about and their attitude and the way they speak to people and so on. That's such a powerful part of that branding experience that, you know, when you build that early team, they will reflect on that. Yeah. They will become part of that. Your personality will rub off on them as well. So Isabel, thank you so much for coming today. So people will be interested in reaching out to you.
Yes.
And whether they are potential investors, potential partners, agencies, or people who want to work in your team. Yes. What is the most effective way of them contacting you?
They can contact me either on LinkedIn, Isabel Gonzalez. Yeah. Gonzalez.
We'll put all the details in the show notes.
Or Klaud9, so Klaud9.com. We have a contact email address there as well, so they can always, you know, drop us an email. We normally, you know, sort of answer within, you know, a couple of hours, so fairly fast as well.
Excellent.
Okay.
Isabel Gonzalez, everybody, thank you so much for sharing your time and your journey with us. We wish you all the best, and all the best with your fundraising and expansion.
Thanks a lot, Graham. Really appreciate, you know, having me on board.
Excellent.
And yes, thanks a lot.
Good.